And I came back because I'm pretty sure that you did the same thing I did. So I was just scrolling on my phone, minding my business, and all of a sudden I kept seeing this trailer for the show, and it was called Dahmer Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story. And I was like, oh, forget it. And I just kept scrolling because if you're a true crime fan, like I'm a true crime fan, then I'm pretty sure you've already seen every Jeffrey documentary there is, or you've heard about every story about Jeffrey Dahmer. So I was just like, you know what? I'm not gonna watch it. But then everyone kept tweeting about it and stuff. So I said, you know what? I'm gonna watch it. And then I realized that Evan Peters was playing Jeffrey Dahmer. And I said, oh, if you're an American Horror Story fan, then you know. So when I was watching the show, I already kind of knew the story of Jeffrey Dahmer, but I was like, this doesn't seem to be exactly how I remember the story. So I decided to do some research, and I found a couple of facts that weren't true in the story or that was missing from the story, and I decided to put it in a video so you guys can see it and you can compare the two, the show on Netflix and what really happened. I just want to give you guys a warning that there will be spoilers, so if you haven't seen the show, go watch the show, then come right on back over here so you can get the real facts of what happened. So when the show first starts out, they don't really give you any background history, they just jump into a story. I just want to let you guys know that Jeffrey Dahmer had previous crimes before he started to commit murder, and he was well known by the police. Okay, so let's start off with episode 1. I'm going to talk about Glenda Cleveland, played by Niecy Nash. If you know Niecy Nash, you know she's the bomb, but Glenda was played by Niecy Nash, and it shows her living next door to Jeffrey Dahmer. But in all actuality, Glenda didn't live next door to Jeffrey Dahmer. She lived in an apartment adjacent to Jeffrey Dahmer. So she wasn't even in the same apartment building as Jeffrey Dahmer, which is crazy because this changes the whole entire show. Because throughout the whole entire show, you just see Glenda being a next door neighbor, but she's really not his next door neighbor. She is in the building next to his building. Blows my mind. But also, Glenda Cleveland, she is a composite character that is mixed between two people. So it's mixed between Glenda and a female called Pamela Bass. Now, Pamela Bass was the one who actually lived next door to Jeffrey Dahmer. So they just put these two females into one character. And Pamela was the one who actually consumed the meat from the sandwich that Jeffrey Dahmer gave her. Yeah, so that was Pamela Bass that lived next door to Jeffrey. It wasn't Glenda Cleveland.
You got senior citizens living downstairs from you. You have people like me who is befriending you, and you are over here cutting up human bodies, eating body parts. I have eaten a sandwich from you. I have probably eaten someone's body part. How dare you do this to me?
So let's jump into Tracy Edwards. I just want to start off by saying in the show, they show Tracy Edwards at a gay club, and then Jeffrey Dahmer comes up to him and they start talking. But that's actually not what happened. So Jeffrey met Tracy at a mall, and actually Tracy is not gay, but Jeffrey met Tracy at a mall, and Jeffrey came up to him and asked him if he could take pictures of him and he would give him $100. And Tracy took him up on the offer. So then he goes back to the apartment. So that's true, they did go back to the apartment, but some facts inside of this episode was a little bit different. They went inside the apartment, and what you saw was what happened until he was talking about his fish tank. So they show him standing up looking at the fish tank, but actually he was sitting on the couch looking at the fish tank, him and Jeffrey. And then out of nowhere, Jeffrey just puts the cuff on him. And he had a knife pointed in the back of his back.
Okay, when you start talking about the fish in the fish tank, do you bring that up or does he?
He does.
And what do you do when he does that?
I turn to the right, like the fish tank is here, I'm turning all the way over here.
You turn to your right to look at it?
To look at the fish tank, right.
And when that happens, what happens to you?
All of a sudden a handcuff and a knife is pulled on me.
So that's the only little difference that happened in that scene. And then when Tracy was trying to run out of the apartment and you see him unlocking the locks to get out, Tracy said that there were a bunch of locks on the door, He also said in an interview that there was a bunch of locks on the door and he was trying his hardest to get out. But the police actually said that there were only 2 locks on Jeffrey's door. So that part of the story was a little embellished by Tracy. Let me just throw a little fun fact in here that I found when I was researching. So around this time throughout the show, when this happened with Jeffrey Dahmer, Tracy was indicted for battery against a 14-year-old girl. But also after this whole thing happened, he did get a little bit of fame. So he was doing interviews and people knew him around the neighborhood and stuff. But somehow he ended up homeless and he was living on the streets for a while. And around, I think it was 2010, 2012, don't quote me, I'm not for sure, he had gotten charged with homicide in connection to another homeless man's death. So let's jump into episode 2. So in episode 2, we see 2 officers interacting with Jeffrey and Conerak Sinthasomphone. You know what I'm talking about. The 14-year-old Asian boy. We see him interacting with him, and then we also see the police officers walking up. Now in the show, they only showed 2 police officers, but there were actually 3 police officers. Their names were John Balzarak, Joseph Gabrish, and Rick Porukin. Love these names. I'm not gonna say these names right, so leave me alone. Another thing they don't show you in this episode is that there were also medical services there. Yes, the fire department came to help because they got a call and they were actually turned away by the police officers. The police officers told them that they weren't in need of any help, that this boy was just drunk and they could go home. The police officers actually did bring Conerak back to Jeffrey's apartment. They did go inside and bring him in there. They took a look around the apartment. They did not see anything unusual. The police officer said that they did smell a smell, but it smelled like someone just recently used the bathroom, like they just did a bowel movement. After the murders, the police officers were fired by the chief, but however, a judge reinstated them, and then they had a nice long career in law enforcement. So the scene where Jeffrey actually meets Conerak at the liquor store and he offers him some liquor and to go back to his apartment to take pictures, where the scene took place wasn't at the liquor store. It was actually at the Grand Avenue Mall. That's where he met Conerak, and then they went back to his apartment. Now it is true that Jeffrey did his brother, and that Jeffrey didn't know that that was Conerak's brother, but I'm not for sure that Conerak actually brought it up to him. Like when he was in the car, like, oh, you know who I am? I know what you did, my brother, whatever he said. Yeah, no one's even gonna say that, because why would you get in the car with them? But I don't believe he said that, and I couldn't find anything in my research saying that he actually said that. And Jeffrey said that he did not know they were related. Also, when you see Conerak outside the building, and then you see Glenda and the police officers and stuff, that scene didn't happen that way. Glenda was actually in her apartment in the adjacent building, not Jeffrey's building. And it was actually her daughter and her niece that were outside, and they saw Conerak. And they are the ones who called the police. Actually, the niece Nicole Childress, she is the one who called the police, and that is the 911 call that you heard.
Hey, hi, I'm on 25th and State, and this is young man. He is butt naked. He has been beaten up. He is very bruised up. He can't stand. He's study fall out. He is butt naked. He has no clothes on. He was really hurt. And I ain't got no cord on him. I just seen him, and he needs some help.
Where is he at?
On 25th and State, the corner of 25th and State.
So let's jump into episode 3. So in episode 3, that's where we see Jeffrey's first victim, Stephen Hicks. So yes, this is true. He did meet Stephen and he did have a concert to go to. All those actions were true, even the part of Stephen. But what they didn't show in this scene is that Jeffrey actually over his corpse and he dissected his body in the basement. Then he chopped it up and put it in garbage bags and stored it away. Several weeks later, he unearthed the remains and then he dissolved the flesh in acid and crushed the bones with a sledgehammer and then scattered them in the woodlands behind his parents' home. So let's jump into episode 4. So in episode 4, we see a scene where Jeffrey is in the army and he's touching on this other man that seems to be unconscious. Well, they didn't show you the full picture of what actually happened there. So Jeffrey Dahmer was in the army and he was actually accused by 2 men. They claimed that he drugged them. So let's jump into a different scene in episode 4. So we see Jeffrey, and he has a job as a phlebotomist, and he's working at a blood center. And then we see him go and drink the whole bag of blood. Now this scene is kind of true, but not really true, just like the whole theme we're going on here with. So Jeffrey told police that he went onto the rooftop of the center, took a vial of blood, and tried to drink it, but he ended up spitting it out. Oh, and I also looked to see if he worked at the butcher shop, because they show him in a couple scenes working there, but I couldn't find any evidence saying that he actually worked at a butcher shop, so I don't know how true that is, but I guess it adds onto the theme of him cutting up meat and stuff, so I think that was just fiction. So now let's jump into episode 5, and this is where we get to meet Ron Flowers. So this is where we see Jeffrey go up to Ron in his car, and he asks him if he needs help, and he could give him a ride home. Now, in Ron Flowers' testimony, he said that he was actually at a phone booth making calls to his friends to see if they could help him with his car, and that's when Jeffrey walked up to him and said that he could help him. So then let's jump into the scene where he's actually at Jeffrey's house, and then we see that Jeffrey drugs him. And the grandma comes running downstairs, and she stays by Ron's side the whole time, and she ends up saving him. That's why Jeffrey didn't kill him. Well, this is partially true. In Ron's testimony, he says that when he got to the grandma's house, the grandma asked if that was Jeffrey, and Jeffrey said, "Yeah, grandma, it's me." And then he went upstairs. So then Jeffrey told his grandma that we were just gonna have a cup of coffee, and then that's when Ron yelled upstairs saying that he doesn't have time for coffee, he has to go. And then the officers asked him, "Do you know if the grandma heard you?" He was like, "Yeah, she heard me. I'm pretty sure she had to because I was speaking loud enough."
Upstairs, I heard a voice that sounded to be coming from an adjacent room. That was on the same level, and the voice was an elderly woman's voice, and she said, "Is that you, Jeff?"
And did Dahmer reply?
Yeah, he walked over to the doorway to where the sound was coming from, and he said, "Yeah, it's me, Grandma. I'm just going to make myself a cup of coffee."
Were you there at that time?
Yeah, and then I started saying, "I don't have time for a cup of coffee. I really do have to go. I've got a lot of things to do in the morning. I have to go," and I just kept repeating myself.
Were you speaking fairly loudly at this time?
I wouldn't say fairly loud, but my voice does carry usually pretty well.
Did you believe the person in the next room would have heard you?
Yes, she would have.
So yes, Ron technically did get saved by Jeffrey's grandmother, but she didn't come running downstairs. She wasn't sticking by his side. She didn't put him on the bus. That didn't happen. She just overheard him when he was talking to Jeffrey, and then Jeffrey realized, like, oh, my grandma knows that someone's here, so I can't kill him, and I can't bury him in the backyard. So Ron said he only remembers going to the house and then waking up in the hospital. He said that when he woke up in the hospital, he had abrasions all over him. He had some on his face, he had one on his hip, he had a ligature mark around his neck. He said that his underwear were inside out. He said he was also missing money, a bracelet, and a necklace. Now, the police did question Jeffrey, but they found his story to be true. Now, I just want to throw a little fun fact in there. The show didn't show this too much, but Jeffrey had a lot of victims. He drugged and or a lot of victims, and he didn't kill them all. Jeffrey said he only killed the ones that he wanted to keep forever and that he didn't want them to leave him. So in another scene, we see that Jeffrey gets sentenced to spend a year in the Milwaukee House Corrections for a sexual assault in the 2nd degree. The show made it seem like this was a jail, however, it was actually a dormitory. So it wasn't really as harsh as a jail, it was more set up as like a dorm. You know what dorms look like. It was more like that. In the show, you could see how the judge was talking to Jeffrey and just basically being really lenient with him. In actuality, he did get a lot of criticism for this, and people were very upset by the sentencing Jeffrey got. Okay, so in another scene, we see Jeffrey and his father arguing about a box that's in his room. Jeffrey's dad wants this box open, and he starts flipping out, and then he goes downstairs to find something to open the box, and when he comes back up, Jeffrey's like, "Oh, I found the key," and then he opens it and there's Playboy magazines in there. Now, this scene did kind of happen, but not really. So Jeff's dad did come and want to see what was in the box, but Jeff's dad took the box and then goes into the basement and then was going to bust it open. However, Jeffrey started to freak out and started to have this big argument with his father, which distracted his father from opening the box, so the box was never opened.
There were close calls, like this one with his father, Lyle.
I had a box in my
bedroom closet, and it contained the mummified head and genitals of a young man I met in one of the bars down in Milwaukee. And it was a locked metal box. My dad one week came to visit and happened to see it, and he was wondering what was in it. He didn't know. Nobody knew. I told him it was pornography, some magazines. And he wasn't satisfied with that answer. We got into a bit of an argument because I wouldn't open it up. He took the locked box down to the basement and was about to smash it open. But I came back in the house, we reconciled.
Let's jump into episode 6. This is the episode with Tony Hughes. Now this episode touched my soul. How they sat there and had it muted. Like, did they really have to do that? I was crying throughout. I think he was in episode 1 and maybe the first episode and the second episode, but I was crying like a baby. That was just so sad to me. Back to the show. So the show showed that Tony and Jeffrey had a relationship for a long period of time, but in Jeffrey's confession, he said that he met him that night and then killed him. It wasn't more than a night, basically. However, Tony's friends said that Tony knew Jeffrey for at least a year, if not 2, and they were friendly and they would hang out. His friend actually said that Jeffrey had came around to her house about maybe 6 times looking for Tony to hang out. Here's another fun fact. Did you guys know that Tony was the second victim that he tried to drill a hole into his head and put the acid in? Yeah. When the police went to return Conerak, you know, in that scene where they show the foot, that was Tony Hughes' foot. So Tony died before Conerak, and Tony was actually dead in Jeffrey's apartment for a few days before he decided to dismember him.
They were in the apartment. They were actually in the apartment, and there was a dead young man in the bedroom on the floor. I couldn't believe it when it turned out that they didn't see anything. I couldn't believe it. And yes, it did shock me, but not enough to quit. That's how strong the compulsion was.
Jeffrey Dahmer describes the unspeakable with...
So in another scene, we see that Jeffrey meets his new neighbor, Gene Vaughn. Now, Gene Vaughn was found dead in apartment 308. He was strangled to death. And a lot of people think Jeffrey did it, but Jeffrey says that he had nothing to do with that murder. However, in the show, they made it seem like Jeffrey committed that murder. So in episode 7, we see Jeffrey and the manager of the building talking, and the manager tells Jeffrey that he's getting a lot of complaints and he has to take care of this and he can't have him living there. Now they show him giving him an eviction notice. However, reading through all the documents and the articles and watching the trial, he doesn't actually say if he actually evicted him. He talks about giving him the eviction notice, like typing it up, letting other people know that he wants to put this in motion and in place, but we don't actually know if he actually got evicted. So here's another interesting fact. So you know how they show Jeffrey at trial and going through the whole trial and everything like that. Come to find out, Jeffrey did not wear his glasses at trial. He said he didn't want to be able to look the jury and the victims in the face. So mostly throughout the whole trial, he didn't have his glasses on. So let's jump into episode 9. So in episode 9, we see that Jeffrey gets attacked by an inmate. An inmate takes a self-made knife and stabs him in the neck, and then Jeffrey ends up in the hospital. Now, this is not how this actually went down or how it actually happened. An inmate did take a self-made knife and tried to slash Jeffrey's neck, but he was unsuccessful. And Jeffrey was not harmed and anybody else was not harmed. So let's jump into episode 10. This is where Jeffrey is murdered. You see in the episode that the inmate, Christopher Scarver, jumps with a pole and starts bashing him in the head, bashing him, trying to kill him, all that stuff. But in reality, that's not actually what happened. They were both in the bathroom at the Columbia Correction Institute, and they were performing cleaning duties. Now, Christopher said he confronted Dahmer about his crimes. He had went to jail around the same time Dahmer had went to jail, so he was a little unfamiliar with what happened, but he did get newspaper clippings and was keeping it in his pocket to remind him of what Jeffrey did. So Christopher decided to confront Jeffrey Dahmer, and he said, "I asked him if he did those things because I was fiercely disgusted. He was shocked." Yes, he was. That's what Christopher said, and he also said that he started looking for the door pretty quick. "I blocked him." So Christopher took a 20-inch metal pole that he stole from the exercise room and hit Jeffrey twice over the head. Jeffrey Dahmer's skull was crushed, and he was later pronounced dead an hour later at the hospital. Christopher said, "He ended up dead. I put his head down." Savage. Now the crazy part is that throughout this entire show, you know how you see Glenda and Jeffrey interacting? Sources believe that they actually never met. Like I said, she was in an adjacent building. She did know some of the stuff that was going on. She was making the phone calls. She was very concerned, but we don't know if they actually met. Like I said, the neighbor next to Jeffrey was Pamela Bass. And when we see the scene of him giving her the sandwich to eat, we don't believe that ever happened. So guys, those are all the points that I wanted to point out throughout the show after watching the show, watching the trial, reading articles, watching videos. I just wanted to give a little quick differences between the two so you guys can know the actual facts. And I didn't want to go throughout Jeffrey's whole history now. That's a long history, a lot of murders and all those things. So you guys can watch videos to see what actually happened throughout the whole thing. But I just wanted to point out the points that stuck out to me. Of course, I probably forgot a few things, and maybe everything I said isn't completely accurate, but I tried my best to research and get as many articles that said the same thing, and from my knowledge and the trial, I tried my best to put it all together. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I do recommend that you guys watch the trial because it was very interesting. They described the things that really happened and stuff, so you guys should watch it. I was very interested and it was fascinating. I have one question that I want to leave off with you guys. So do you think Jeffrey Dahmer was just this crazy serial killer that targeted minorities and just wanted to torture them and kill them? Or do you think he was really mentally ill and had abandonment issues and trust issues and actually cared about his victims and didn't want them to leave and wanted to keep them forever? Which one do you think? I would love to hear your thoughts. Please leave comments. Thank you for watching. Thank you for clicking my video. I hope you guys come back for more. And thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
These obsessive desires and thoughts wanting to control them, to, I don't know how to put it, possess them permanently.
And that's why you killed them.
Right. Right. Not because I was angry with them, not because I hated them, but because I wanted to keep them with me.